Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar to introduce the ODI Fellowship Scheme. My name is Sasha Kapadia. I'm the Director of Global Advisory here at ODI, and I lead the Fellowship Scheme. I'm very pleased to introduce my peers today on this webinar. First, I will introduce Darren Lomas, who's the Program Officer for the ODI Fellowship Scheme.
Hi, I'm Darren. So along with Susan Barron, I've been responsible for the placement and recruitment of several hundred fellows now into quite a few dozen countries. So I've got quite a lot of experience with the scheme.
Thanks, Darren. And Darren mentioned Susan Barron, who is a long-standing champion and steward of the scheme. She couldn't join us today, but know that she is a resource for all of us going forward in this process. I would then like to introduce a current fellow and an alum of the program. Karishma Tiwari is a current fellow at the Ministry of Health in Malawi. She started in January of 2023. Karishma, can you say hello?
Hi, everybody. My name is Karishma Tiwari, and as Sasha mentioned, I'm currently in Malawi with the Ministry of Health. Thank you.
Thanks, Karishma. And I'd like to introduce Jamelia Harris, a former fellow in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development in Sierra Leone from 2012 to 2014, and now is a teaching fellow in the Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Warwick. Jamelia, can you say hi?
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to chatting with you this afternoon or morning.
So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. I will do a very brief presentation of the scheme to give you a sense of how it works. We have enabled a Q&A function on this webinar. So the chat has been disabled, but if you have any questions, please channel them through the Q&A. Where appropriate, we will be answering them in real time, chatting right back to you. And where it makes sense, we will direct questions either to Darren or myself, or to Karishma or Jamelia. Once I get through the presentation, we will turn it over to our fellows who will speak a little bit about their experiences. And then we hope to leave about 20 minutes at the end, at least, for your questions. So without further ado, I will turn my screen on. Sorry, folks, having a bit of technical difficulties. It seems like I clicked on the wrong window. Okay. What is the ODI Fellowship Scheme? The ODI Fellowship Scheme is a demand-led partnership between ODI and partner governments. In 2023, we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the ODI Fellowship Scheme. So this means that it truly brings value to our public sector institutions, as well as to the fellows themselves. It's a win-win arrangement. So governments benefit in so much that in lower-income countries, provides them with high caliber junior professionals, and fellows benefit because they get a very unique opportunity to work in lower and middle-income countries as local civil servants embedded for an extended of time. What is the scheme? It was established 60 years ago. We've partnered with over 40 countries and an additional dozen or so international and regional organizations. We've placed over 300 fellows over the course of the last 6 decades, ranging from the Caribbean to the South Pacific. And the current list of countries where fellows are placed are the following: Ethiopia, Fiji, Ghana, Malawi, Namibia, Pakistan, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Solomon Islands, Somaliland, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, Timor-Leste, Tonga, Uganda, Uzbekistan, Vanuatu, and Zambia. So as you can see, the geographies in which we work are extremely diverse. The needs are very diverse. And so therefore we make sure to recruit a set of of fellows who have the skills and capabilities to meet those various needs. Why do host governments want ODI fellows? Well, simplistically, they provide value and they meet a need. ODI fellows contribute to stronger institutions. They help strengthen internal systems of a ministry. They improve national and subnational policies. They ensure that their institutions are adequately and appropriately leveraging networks and building coalitions in order to advance their objectives. Given their insider and outsider status, they're contributing to a positive work culture in their office. But most importantly, they're advancing mutual learning. So this is not a one-way street. Fellows contribute a lot to their workplaces, but they get so much more in reverse. So they learn just a tremendous amount about what it takes to enact change within an institution that is very, very different to the ones that they might be familiar with. What's in it for a fellow? My last point sort of refers to this. The ODI Fellowship is unlike anything that exists in the development sector. It is a unique and immersive work experience that allows individuals to learn in a really experiential and deliberate and thoughtful way how to be effective in the development space. It provides an opportunity to develop tangible personal and professional skills. And of course, it's an ability to see, experience, and live in a different country and embrace a different culture. What do ODI Fellows do? So they do many things. There is a large portion of fellows go on to be posted in ministries of finance, ministries of planning, central banks. So you'll see a good chunk of them are there, but many then also work in line ministries, health and education, agriculture and environment. In some cases, they're helping countries improve their external positions and their external stances. And so that's where you see trade and industry coming in. And then you have fellows who are statisticians and are placed in government statistical agencies. The other could encapsulate a regional organization or an international organization. What do fellows do on a day-to-day basis? So to be very broad about it, they cover policy analysis, which means they analyze data and information to solve problems. This could be looking at the macroeconomic environment, looking at expenditure in particular sectors, or helping to respond to crises. And the COVID pandemic was quite a challenging and trying time for fellows who were mobilized in many ways to assist their host institutions. They go on to help strengthen systems. So in order to understand and identify opportunities to make systems work more smoothly. So this could be on aspects of national accounts or budget coordination. They're really looking to streamline the way that government works. And finally, they help build networks and communicate complex ideas. Fellows come with a background often in economics or in statistics, which may be quite different to the experience amongst their teams in their host institution. And so if there's an interest in advancing or creating a particular model, a fellow will be often tasked with helping their local colleagues to implement. So they can advise on trade policy, trade negotiations, and work on technical subjects and as advisors. How does it work? Well, ODI is the facilitator of the scheme. We are essentially the negotiator, the broker, the administrator. So what we do is we select candidates, We identify fellowship posts in coordination with our host institution partners. We prepare a briefing for all fellows before they get posted, and that takes place in person in London at the ODI office. We oversee the administration of the scheme throughout the 24 months of the fellowship, which entails salary payments, housing subsidy payments, flights, medical insurance, and then reports to our funders. The ODI Fellowship Scheme is in large part funded by the UK government and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, but we have a number of different funders as well, and we are responsible to them. And of course, we provide duty of care, and this is especially important in a very uncertain world. So we are charged and tasked with fellows' safeguarding and security. What does the host institution do? So they help identify the fellowship post, which includes drafting a job description well in advance of a fellow joining his or her post. They manage the fellow on a day-to-day basis. They essentially extend the same conditions of service as a local staff. So this means they pay a portion of the fellow's salary in local currency. They ensure that fellows can work legally in the country, and they provide day-to-day duty of care in the work environment. So anything that deals with the workplace itself. The ODI Fellow is responsible for doing their job to the best of their ability. So being mindful of and respectful of the needs of that particular institution, and listening to managers and colleagues about how best to utilize their skills. They follow the rules of the host institution and promote the interests of the host institution well before a fellow's own. Because of the unique insider-outsider status of a fellow, there will be a lot of demands on a fellow's time and a lot of requests for intel, and yet a fellow's accountability is to the host institution first and foremost. And last, be a good colleague, right? Show respect, behave with humility, be flexible, be adaptable to changing conditions. It's an immersive experience, and one that is best suited for those who can go with the flow to some extent. Who are we looking for? So postgraduate economists and statisticians who can apply their skills practically. I want to emphasize here that while a master's degree is a requirement, it's not necessary that a degree be in economics or in statistics. Individuals who have a master's degree in public policy, in international development, in another relevant field should very much apply, because their skills are valuable and could make a meaningful contribution to the fellowship scheme. Relevant work experience is obviously a plus. But most important, one must have the qualities that lend to a successful experience: resilience, humility, adaptability, and a perceptiveness around culturally sensitive issues. Applicants from all nationalities are welcome. I want to say that again. This was not always the case in the history of the scheme, given its close connection with the UK government, but applicants from all nationalities are welcome and encouraged to apply. And we especially encourage applications from the LGBTQ+ community, as well as disabled candidates. And we will work closely with selected individuals from those communities to ensure that they are in a successful placement that allows them to thrive. How to apply? Well, apply online via our website. Applications are live and have been live for the last week. They will be open until the end of April. So apply soon if you're interested. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at fellows@odi.org. So I'm just going to take a quick look at the Q&A to see if there's anything that we might want to address that's sort of admin related, Darren, before we move on to our alum participants. So I see one that says, can I apply if I am still in my master's program? Yes, you can. If you will complete your master's degree before October 2023. Right, Darren? May I know more about the interview process? So Darren, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so the interview process, we have in the past had a panel interview, which lasts about 25 minutes for each candidate. And then also a group assessment, which kind of tests the more different skills, not necessarily a technical knowledge. So it's a two-part exercise over half a day.
Another question I see is about the pre-departure briefing session in September in London. It's a full week. So ODI would be arranging for selected fellows to come to London. That would be paid for by ODI and to participate in a full week's worth of briefing sessions. Does this fellowship only apply to economics and statistics as candidates? No, right? If you have a skill set that you think is aligned with the goals and objectives of the scheme, please apply. Darren, do you want to tackle this question about deferrals?
Yeah, so we haven't ever actually deferred placements. And the reason really is because the number of placements varies each year and the type of placements varies each year. So someone that's selected one year might not be suitable for the next. So they'd have to apply again, unfortunately. So I think in order, there's a lot of questions coming in. Let's move on to the alum portion of our webinar, and then we can get back to some of these questions at the end, or Darren and I can type some answers in the chat as well. Without further ado, I will turn it over perhaps to Jamelia first, since she's our alum, and then Karishma can speak about her current experience as a fellow.
Thanks, Asha. I did a fellowship in 2012 to 2014 in Sierra Leone. And I guess to speak to some of the questions, I applied while I was still doing my master's. So I was doing my master's at LSE. I found out that I had been selected to take part in the scheme before I had completed my master's. So that was perfectly fine. I didn't know what language they spoke in Sierra Leone, for example, when I found out that I was going to Sierra Leone. So like just from the beginning, it was a completely new experience. I was in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, working in debt management. I went into it being, very technical and wanting to go and do a lot of forecasting and a lot of economic policy. And I guess my first learning from my fellowship was working in developing countries as much economics as it is politics or health economics or development economics, whatever it is you do as your specialty. So a lot of that was just sort of learning about the political climate and what that means in terms of the types of work that I was doing and how those two things come together and interact. I did a lot of work around treasury bills and the debt sustainability analysis. And that was all new to me. I had a lot of quantitative knowledge and skills, but I also learned quite a lot from my colleagues. My placement was different in the sense that it was the first one. And that gave a lot of flexibility to sort of explore and make something new of the role. But it meant I had to go with the flow a great deal because sometimes my boss might ask me to do something, but then he would ask me to do something else. throughout my 2 years, I did a lot of work within the Ministry of Finance, but I also did work in the central bank as well, because there was a lot of overlap with debt management and the treasury bills, etc. I also, as an ODI fellow, you're seen as coming with certain types of analytical and research skills. So we were 5 in the Ministry of Finance, and we were often called upon to produce these policy briefs. So they used to refer to us as the ODI think tank, which we were not really, but anytime there was a policy question, they would ask us to write like a short policy brief. And that was, I think that's quite neat for us. And another fellow at that time and myself, we developed an academic interest out of that. And I went on to do a PhD, and he is also doing a PhD now and currently works for the World Bank. This other person who I speak of, we both used to lecture at the university at Faraday College. So we also had that opportunity to explore something else that we can do after the fellowship. In terms of sort of day-to-day, what I would say is like you spend a lot of time at work, and you get to know your colleagues really well, but it's also important to get to know the country really well, and the place that you're living with, and your colleagues really appreciate that. I had an ongoing relationship with Sierra Leone after my fellowship because my colleagues liked what I was doing, and I continued to provide policy advice as a consultant, also through an ODI scheme, budget strengthening initiative. But is that sort of, when your colleagues see that you really value and have an interest in the country and really want to see the country grow and develop, they respect that a lot. And I think it shines through in the relationship that you have and the quality of work that you can do. I did my PhD research in Sierra Leone. So my research and my interest and relationship with the country continues to grow. And I credit the ODI Fellowship for that. I met my husband in Sierra Leone. So it is it's very difficult to separate those 2 years of the fellowship and the last 10 years of my life, because they've become so intertwined with each other, both in terms of the professional and then as a result, the personal as well. So yeah, I can sing the praises of the fellowship. I guess another thing I would say is that in terms of the support that you get from ODI, you can see Darren is like typing away now and answering all your questions. And this is characteristic of Darren. So we were in Sierra Leone at the start of the Ebola outbreak. So there was a lot of support to us because Ebola started in 2014 and I was there 2012 to 2014. So there was a lot of support to us in terms of just sort of navigating that and making sure that we were able to fulfill our duties to the various ministries, but also just making sure that we were safe. And then when we had to be taken out of the country, making sure that that happened timely and considering our interests as best as possible. Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll stop there and pass over, and then I can take lots of questions after.
Thanks so much, Jamelia. I hear what you're saying, how it's difficult to unentangle the personal and the professional, given what a transformative experience it was for you. Karishma, we'll turn it over to you since you've only been in your role for the last 3 months. So there was an interest, we did this webinar yesterday in the morning to try and accommodate some time zones. And there was an alum who showed a nice little graph of kind of the ebbs and flows during the fellowship experience. And he indicated the first phase is the honeymoon period. So perhaps you're still in your honeymoon period because after the honeymoon period, I think was the reality check or some such that he referenced. So off to you.
Thank you, Sasha. Hi, everybody. As has been mentioned, I am one of the newest fellows I've just started in January, and I'm at the Ministry of Health in Malawi. So my experience is so far quite limited to these 3 months, but I mean, Sasha has it bang on. It is 100% amazing so far. Maybe this is the honeymoon period and it's going to go downhill and then come back up. I'm not sure, but it's been really, really great so far. So I will talk about some of the work that I've been doing and some of my early reflections on the scheme. In terms of the work, I think Malawi, at least the Ministry of Health in Malawi, is one of the longer standing fellowship positions within the fellowship scheme. So there is already a lot of trust within the system when an ODI fellow comes in. So it was, while some people take some time to sort of build up their portfolio of work, that was definitely not the case with me. I came in and there were projects kind of waiting for me to start. And my manager was very clued in as to who the ODI fellow is supposed to be, what their role is like. He also had a huge sort of active engagement in building my terms of reference. So it was really helpful to come in and have somebody sort of give me that guidance from day one. I don't have a health background. I have been working in education for the past few years, and before that, I've been working in economic consulting for a long time, which also answers, I think, one of the questions on the portal as to whether there is a time limit after graduation as to when you can apply. I mean, I finished my master's in 2015, and I started my fellowship in 2023. So there's at least no 8-year time limit, and I don't think there's any further time limit either. But I don't have a health background, but I think the first project that I was given was an excellent project to kind of really show me the context of Malawi and Malawi's health system. I was working on one of the biggest grants, the health sector grants within Malawi, and I was working on the health system strengthening component of this. This enabled me to sort of meet people across the ministry at very senior levels, learn about the needs of the ministry, how such activities under such grants are prioritized, sort of coordinating and leading on developing this entire grant, which was a great experience. That being said, it was a lot of work at the start, and I think especially given the fact that I really didn't know people or the sector, it was really being thrown into the deep end, which I actually really enjoyed. And coming out of it and reflecting on it, I think that it's taught me a lot already. But I think that often ODI fellows are sort of, especially if you're posted to a country where there has been a fellowship for the past few years and they know the kinds of roles that ODI fellows undertake, you could have a lot of work coming your way from day one. The other big thing that I've been working on, because it's budget season right now, is the national health budget. And that's, again, very, very interesting. I think it really shows you how sort of your technical skills along with your colleagues' contextual knowledge can really strengthen the health system. I think the other thing that I would say is in these 2.5 or 3 months, I've already sort of realized what a fantastic and niche opportunity this is, because you can really see the difference in what you see on the ground and what you can learn versus what somebody at sort of an international NGO or a partner or a donor organization here can contribute. I think sitting within the government office, sitting around your colleagues, you are really shown the realities on the ground. And I used to work in the UK for a nonprofit that was headquartered in the UK but had country offices in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I think one of the reasons for me to do the ODI Fellowship was to be closer to the field. But I actually think that even being in a Sub-Saharan African country, but working from the office of a partner organization is very, very, very different to working from a government office. You really learn what the challenges on the ground are. And sometimes they're very, very basic challenges, like the laptops that they are given are not good enough to do the work that they need to do. You will never see this sitting outside an organization, or like something as basic as they don't have electricity at home often, and so they really can't do any work once they leave the office. And I think this for me has probably been, I really appreciate what a sort of fantastic opportunity this is, because this really sort of is a very once in a lifetime opportunity that you can get to actually be able to see this from the government's perspective. the other things that I would say, I think ODI throughout has been extremely supportive through the entire application process. I mean, I have definitely sent Darren a bunch of questions when I was applying, and he's always been very quick with his responses and always responded very helpfully. I also think that the briefing week, which was asked in one of the questions as well, which is a week-long meeting in London, in addition to sort of preparing you for what's coming, I think the best part of it is that you get to spend an entire week with your cohort and really get to know them, especially given the fact that, like, following this week, you will be all over the world and you may not have that many chances to actually meet with each other in person. And I think that that 1 week is really a fantastic opportunity to build that network and also make some great friends. I do see how the ODI network is really long-standing, and I'll give you an example of this. We have currently two current ODI fellows in Malawi, but we have two ex-fellows, one who was a fellow in the Pacific Islands and another who was a fellow in Sierra Leone, who are both now working in Malawi. And then there was somebody else who was visiting last week, and so we just had an ODI lunch where there ended up being 6 of us. And the conversations, it's just so obvious that, like, as Jamelia said, your personal and your professional will be intertwined for the foreseeable future, because this is a transformative experience. And I mean, for me, it's only been 2.5, 3 months yet. But I mean, at one point, I remember during the lunch, I actually commented being like, wow, this is like actually getting ridiculous, because every second sentence was about like somebody else who knows somebody else who's an ODI fellow. And like it is a very strong network, and people do, you work together, you sort of live in these contexts together, and I think they do build long-standing relationships. In addition to that, I think in general, I think ODI has been extremely supportive with sort of, providing medical advice or providing travel insurance. They're always an email away. They sort of check in on you every week to ensure that everything is going well. So I think in general, it's really nice to have, that you have that support. I think I will stop there, but happy to take any specific questions as they come in through the chat. Thank you. Back over to you, Sasha.
Thanks so much, Karishma. Yeah, definitely the honeymoon phase. Jamelia, there's a question for you in the chat.
Sure.
Did you ever feel out of your depth?
I did, and I guess maybe it came after the honeymoon phase. So my honeymoon phase was very sweet, because when I got to Sierra Leone, my boss greeted me, and then shortly after that, he went to DC for IMF meetings. And they hadn't sorted out my desk as yet. And he said, well, you can use my office. So I sat in my boss's office for about a month, because after DC, he went off to Japan or something like this. And it was fantastic. And, I had a lot of time to just read about the country, and I had sort of routine tasks to do. But as I said, because my job was relatively new, I had to sort of figure things out and create work for myself. And my personality doesn't. I like having some amount of structure. To sort of know that I'm gonna do this and then I get it done. So I had to create that structure for myself. And like a certain amount, and you have to leave space to sort of go with the flow. And for me, that was lecturing at the university. So I used to do that in my own time on Saturdays, and I knew that this was the thing that I would do every Saturday without fail. Some weeks would be really busy at work, especially around the budget time, or if we had a debt sustainability report to write. But when there was a period of lull, I still had that one thing that I knew, and you can create that for yourself. Another thing that I did as well is my role wasn't really involved with monetary policy, but I was interested in that. So I put myself forward to join the monetary policy technical committee, and I used to go along to that every month. So I guess the difficult part for me came with just sort of the periods where you don't have enough to fill your day, but you have to make yourself available and just sort of be about the ministry. One of the things that I learned is a lot of, in Sierra Leone, it might be different depending on the placement, but a lot of the policies and the decisions get made outside of business hours, because this is when people meet. And so oftentimes you just sort of have to be around, and you might bump into someone, outside the office, in the corridor, and they tell you, oh yeah, there's a meeting that's happening this afternoon. And you go to that meeting, and you can contribute because something comes out of that. So it's just sort of being a little bit flexible in the approach, and not expecting to sit at your desk and the email is going to drop there telling you to do this and do it by this deadline. But it's a different context.
Thanks, Jamelia. There's another question here. What are the kinds of projects that I should showcase in my application? And what should be the level of detailing of those projects in order to highlight key skills that would be kind of attractive to the selection committee? Karishma, would you like to go first since it was more recent for you?
Sure, happy to do so. In my case, when I was working as an economic consultant, I did a lot of work with public sector governments on macro and fiscal policy, and I highlighted those experiences. I also highlighted my experience working for a nonprofit with country offices in Sub-Saharan Africa. I think in terms of the specific skills, I mean, of course, your economic and technical skills, but I think equally your stakeholder engagement and people skills are very important in government. And I think any sort of examples you can give of maybe holding workshops or sort of focus groups where you've had to discuss a larger topic, come up with sort of a way forward, bringing together various different types of opinions. I think those are very critical and will actually help you in your job as well. Yeah, I think those would be the key ones for me.
Jamelia, anything that you would?
So I think for me, I would say one of the things that you're really need to bring out in the application, and also sort of reflect on yourself as you decide to apply for this scheme, is that sort of developing country experience and approach to I guess what we say now as doing development differently, because the ODI Fellowship is very unique in how it's positioned. You are providing technical assistance, but at the same time you're learning a lot, and you're not providing technical assistance in the sort of IMF World Bank consultant type, because you're sitting in government, so you are a civil servant, and you are you're there, you're on the ground, you're working with your colleagues. And I think it takes some skills to do that, but it also takes the right attitude to do that. And it's not so much something that you can, you can't have a bullet point for that in your CV, but it's just sort of, it's the attitude of a different way to approach development and working in a developing country context. So I think it's about thinking through that and reflecting on that as well.
Thanks, Jamelia. So another question for our fellows. During the 2-year fellowship, did you have annual leave to go back home? How often did you travel, either back home or otherwise? And then the second question is on safeguarding and security, if there's anything that you can share about how you experienced that. Karishma, do you want to go first since you're taking advantage of leave tomorrow?
Sure. Yeah, of course you do get annual leave. You get the same amount of annual leave as your local colleagues would get, because technically you are employed by the government that you're working for and not ODI. And in terms of safeguarding and security, I mean, I think as Sasha also mentioned in her presentation, I think day-to-day workplace safeguarding and policies are basically what the policies in the government would be. But outside of that, ODI is very, very helpful. They sort of, they're always there. You can reach out to Susan and Darren at any point. They have a counseling helpline as well. You have sort of travel insurance and insurance for where you are. You have medical insurance. You have evacuation covered. So it's I think overall it's very holistic. You're also given the contact of global security at ODI, who's always one phone call away if something were to go wrong. ODI also has a fellows portal where you sort of outline if you're traveling anywhere and you sort of let them know where you're going to be. So that if something were to happen, they are aware of where you are. They can reach out to you ASAP, and maybe they would have some intel before you about something that's going to come up, and in which case they would sort of help you navigate the issue. Yep, I think that's it from me.
So same in terms of the annual leave, like we would just we have a certain amount that's written in your contract that's similar to your colleagues, and you give your boss some notice in advance asking if you could go on annual leave, and that's usually fine. I think is most postings, your boss sort of you didn't know that you might want to go home for Christmas or for Easter, whatever is the main holiday that you might celebrate, and they're very understanding and accommodating of that. In terms of safeguarding, I have to say that since I was a fellow, ODI has put a lot of new things in place, which sounds really fantastic. Because I was very content with my emails to Darren and Susan, and it used to work really fine. But it seems as though there's a lot more in place now. I guess one of the things I would just add to that is the fellowship scheme. In addition to the salary that you'd get locally, you would also be you get your stipend from ODI, and you also get some allowance to take care of your housing and stuff. So we lived in we lived together as ODI fellows, and we had security on our compound. So you also that's context specific depending on the country, but like in Sierra Leone, it's sort of everybody has security, partially for deterrence rather than anything else. So those things are, and if you feel uncomfortable in any way, then you can always just talk to ODI, and you also have you also have the other ODI fellows. I guess maybe it's important to emphasize that you're not just going out there by yourself. So when I landed in Sierra Leone, there were 5 fellows the year ahead of me. And I also went with 2 other fellows, and we traveled on the plane together. We got there together. We lived together, and we had like a really nice friendship and bond. And so you have your fellows who you can, they're your support system as well when you're there. The people in your cohort. Yeah. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, Jamelia is right in referencing the fact that what Karishma is experiencing is not what existed 10 years ago. And so it's been a large investment on the part of ODI to ensure that there is just a level of assurance and comfort and security, right? The feeling of knowing that if something goes catastrophically wrong, ODI is there. We have a global security team that is, he proudly says he's 24/7, and he really is 24/7. You can contact Rob at any hour of the day for anything at all. And his job is to really, make sure fellows are prepared. So it's a really essential part of the briefing week that takes place before fellows go out to their roles to have a sense of what they might encounter. He's responsible for providing that training to fellows pre-departure, but then all along the way, anything from, is it safe for me to take a car, and cross this border, to, oh, I got bitten by something and it doesn't look great. I should probably go to the hospital, right? Because yeah, go to the hospital. So it's quite extensive now, the safeguarding and the security efforts. Another question that I think is a nice one. What's work-life balance like for an ODI fellow?
I can go first. I think it's been, I would split up my 3-month fellowship into 2 bits. The first part was honestly horrendous. I haven't worked like this since maybe at least the last 6 years. I did several 14 and 16-hour shifts. And it was not fun because I just don't think I'm at that point in my life anymore when I want to work 14 or 16 hours extra. That being said, that was I was very new to the role and I was really thrown into the deep end. I didn't know enough people there. I was honestly coordinating and leading a huge grant which had a hard deadline, but I had absolutely no support because I was the only person from the planning department within the Ministry of Health doing this. But that being said, I honestly think it was a very enriching experience in its own way, because it really did introduce me to the health sector in a way that I think very few other projects would have. And I think it really did give me the opportunity to meet people, learn about the context, and learn about the priorities of Malawi. And I think I was okay with it because I didn't raise it to my own boss, who I'm sure would have provided me with more support if I'd actually raised it, mainly because I was learning so much and I knew that there was a hard deadline coming up after which things would be better. And so I just sort of went with it. And looking back at it, I don't regret it. Following that, honestly, it's been really good. It's been, there is enough to keep my day busy, but I think a lot of this sort of, because there are no external deadlines, of course, besides the national budget having to be done by the time of the new financial year, I think it's been really good in terms of sort of being able to set my own timelines and deadlines and sort of speak up to what I think is possible. So I am sort of working a good 7 to 8 hours a day, but I feel like I have more than enough time to sort of also enjoy the country and learn more about the context that I am in.
Yeah, so I would say that during the fellowship is an excellent time to have very good work-life balance. One of the things, and again, this will be country specific, but in Sierra Leone, they're very much about being present. Whereas I guess in other contexts, it might just be more on the output. So my boss liked us to be in the office between 8 and 4 because that was work time. And in that regard, it also is good for you to set that sort of boundary as your work day, if it's 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, and you're able to do what you have to do within that time. Of course, there'll be periods depending on the ministry that you're in. So I was in the Ministry of Finance, especially around the budgeting time. You will work outside of those hours because there'll be a lot of work coming in terms of preparing the budget. You will also have opportunities to go away with your colleagues for workshops, where you would go for a week, and if you choose to, you stay at the hotel and you're working for the week, ensuring that whatever the output is, it gets pushed out. And then other times you might have a little bit of a lull. But I think for my time, work-life balance was great because then as I said, I had my side project, which was my lecturing. And then I was also just sort of, sussing out what my academic interests are and what I would do if I were to go into academia. The social side, I think, is also really good because you will be there with you would be there with the other ODI fellows, and then there would be other people who are part of the expat community, although you might want to broaden your scope outside of the expat community. But there'll be lots of people who are also willing to see the country as well. So Sierra Leone has really nice beaches. So we used to go to the beach most weekends, or we would go up country and, go to like a nature park or something like that. So there's lots of scope because you have people who, they want to see and they want to experience the country just like you. So you have company to do those sorts of things. And then your colleagues will invite you to do things as well. They would invite you to their weddings and their christenings and whatever it is they're having. And that's also a nice way to get to know your colleagues, to get to know some of the traditions in the country, and just to, assimilate as much as you can.
Great. I'm going to take a question. So since ODI opened up to the rest of the world, has there been an increase in applications from sub-Saharan Africa? What are the odds that an applicant from Africa would be chosen over those from the rest of the world? So it's true, since we opened up the application to everybody. And Darren, when was that? When it was open to all nationalities?
Well, I think, gosh, I don't think it's ever excluded nationalities, but I mean, when it first started, it was definitely geared towards UK-based applicants.
So I guess we started to emphasize that it was open to all nationalities, some number of years ago, and it's true that the applicant pool is diversifying more and more every year. I don't think there are good odds or bad odds, frankly, based on your nationality. I think the intent is to have a diverse, capable, and eager group of individuals participate in the fellowship. And if you're a good candidate, you're a good candidate. I think there's, we will do our best to ensure that, you know, we're being reflective of you know, the composition of the world, and that we're making this a fair process, and we're not privileging certain backgrounds or certain signals on a resume. But yeah, if you think you would do well, put it all in your application, right? There's the standard stuff, right? Give us the, you know, your references, give us your you know, your background and your work experience. But there are a few kind of free answer questions that we've actually tweaked this year, because we want to hear from you and hear about your enthusiasm for the scheme. And if you're sincere, that comes through. Another question on, do you believe, fellows, sectors like education, finance, or health, are they sort of, is it critical to have backgrounds in those subspecialties, or do you think you can kind of pick up on the nuances? I guess, Karishma, your experience indicates that you can, but it would be great to be more explicit about that.
I definitely think that you can pick up. I don't think that at least any of the work that I am doing is technically very complicated or has the most sort of difficult economic concept that I learned during my master's that I probably don't even remember anymore. I think a lot of it is, I think for me, the biggest gap at this point is the contextual knowledge, and that would, whatever background I had, I wouldn't have the Malawi knowledge. And that's where I think that the knowledge of my colleagues is so important, and having their support is so important. Because I think a lot of the sort of technical skills and a lot of the work that you do in terms of drafting, quantitative analysis, stakeholder engagement, all of that is more critical, and you can always pick up sort of health specific nuances quite easily, especially given that I have an economics background. But yeah, for me, I would say the biggest gap is the contextual knowledge, and I think having amazing colleagues is what makes all the difference.
So yeah, I would agree 100%. I think what you should be thinking is the knowledge and the skills that you have, how can you transfer it to a different setting, a different line ministry? There are some postings that would be like a bit more specific with their technical requirements. So for example, if you are in a statistical office, like the equivalent of Office for National Statistics, for example, you might be required to have like a bit more statistical knowledge. But Darren and they would consider this when they do the placement. But I think, yeah, like if you're an economist and you know how to do some sort of regression or some cost benefit analysis or something, you should be able to apply that across different ministries. And a lot of the learning is really contextual and just understanding the country that you're in and how they do different things. Just to say one more thing on that, one of the things that you can do as well in terms of if you really want to push capacity building, and like I know someone who did this in Sierra Leone, is if you see that you've been trained with some technical skills and you're not really using it, but you see there's scope to use it in your work, maybe you could run some workshops with your colleagues and train them on how to use it. So if you see that they use a lot of Excel, but they're not really doing it as well as they can with Excel, you can train them on how to do that, for example.
Thanks, Jamelia. It seems like we're rapidly coming up on the hour, but maybe another question or two before we wrap up. So Jamelia talked about her side project of lecturing at the university. Someone is asking, is there time to work on side projects, potentially like one owns research?
So I I guess it depends on what you mean by your own research. If you are working on a big project, probably not, because I mean, this is your full-time job. And you should treat it as such, because you're there for 2 years and you should try to give the government the most that you can give them from yourself. I say that having done a PhD, and if you're working on something that requires you to have your head in it, I don't see it. It depends on if it's a side project. Teaching a undergraduate economics course doesn't require that. The entry costs are low, especially if you've done a master's and you've recently done a master's. You can pull it together fairly quickly. But if you're trying to write an academic paper that you've done the research for already and you're just writing it up, fine. If you're trying to collect new data and analyze it and put something out, it might be a little bit more difficult. Unless it's spread out over the entire 2 years.
Karishma and her 14-hour days, maybe no time for a side project.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree that this is your full-time job and you want to give the most to it that you can. I personally don't have the inclination at this point to do a side project where I'm sort of working professionally or academically outside of my job, which I'm spending a lot of my day doing. But I do know other technical advisors at the Ministry of Health, not ODI Fellows, but technical advisors that are sort of doing a professional doctorate with their technical advisor position, where they are actually repurposing a lot of the work that they're doing into their DRPR research. So it really depends on what kind of a side project you're talking about. But I would say that within reason, you would have some time. But of course, there would be times when work is quite hectic and it would be difficult to adhere to external deadlines outside of your work, just in case things sort of become very busy at that point.
I think that's fair. And in fact, many fellows, their side project is learning the local language. So when I visited a group of fellows in Addis in December, all 3 of the fellows at the time were spending a significant amount of time learning Amharic. So we've learned and heard from fellows that it's quite beneficial to make that investment in your off hours to learn the language. I think we should wrap it up. So given that it's getting on in the day for many people, and the weekend is here. So I want to thank Jamelia and Karishma for taking the time to speak with us today and share their experiences. I wanted to thank Darren for being here and for rapidly answering many of your questions. And thank Susan in spirit for all that she does for the scheme. And thank you all for joining. The application is live. As I said, it seems like some people may be getting an error trying to access it. So we will investigate that on our side, but know that if you go to our website and look for the fellowship scheme on the ODI website, you should be able to find it pretty easily. This will be recorded and we'll put something up on our website. And so if you have others that you know are interested in the scheme but couldn't make this session, know that this content will live on our website for others to access later on. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful weekend and work on your applications. Thanks so much.